Imagine walking slowly toward the center of a ring under the blinding light of the spotlights. In front of you is no ordinary athlete. There is a 19-year-old wild predator who knows neither compassion nor doubt. A young man who has destroyed 19 consecutive men before the crowd can even settle into their seats. The media mob, the millionaire promoters, and the television analysts have already written the end of your story before the first bell rings. You have been hired solely to be one more victim in the display case of a relentless monster. But while the public screams expecting to see your blood on the canvas, you keep a secret in your heart. You decide that tonight you will not be the sacrificial lamb. You decide that you are going to force the executioner to swallow his own poison. Today you witness the true chronicle of the night when the myth of absolute invincibility was broken forever. Discover how a man whom everyone treated as a simple peasant with no future taught the entire planet that blind ferocity can be stopped with courage, intelligence, and a heart of iron. This is the story of the first fighter who made young Mike Tyson doubt. This is the ultimate lesson of poetic justice inside the squared circle. To understand the colossal magnitude of this feat, it is mandatory to immerse oneself in the atmosphere of terror that dominated boxing in May 1986. The heavyweight circuit was not living through a normal era. It was absolutely terrified by the appearance of a teenager born on the most dangerous streets of Brooklyn. He was barely 19 years old, but his presence in any stadium generated an almost religious panic. His record was not a simple list of victories. It was a harvest of systematic destruction. He recorded 19 professional fights, 19 crushing victories, and 19 chilling knockouts. The most disturbing thing about this statistic was that 12 of those victories occurred in the very first round. Mike Tyson did not step into the ring to box in the traditional sense. He stepped in to execute. He was a phenomenon of nature molded in the forge of a dark gym by the mastermind mind of his trainers. He wore only black shorts and a worn towel over his shoulders. He did not use elegant silk robes or socks in his leather boots. He claimed that dispensing with socks made him feel closer to the earth, closer to primitive war. He was a modern gladiator designed with a single goal in life: to rip away the consciousness of his opponents in the shortest possible time. When Tyson walked toward the ring, the entire arena kept a deathly silence. His rivals, gigantic men over 2 meters tall and over 100 kilos of muscle, lost the battle before throwing the first punch at him. They could be seen sweating cold in their corner. They were seen swallowing spit uncontrollably while the central referee read the rules of the fight. They looked into those dark eyes empty of empathy and knew they were not there to win a measure of sporting glory. They were there to try to walk out on their own 2 feet without suffering permanent brain damage. The young executioner's fighting style was a suffocating and unbearable punishment for the human psyche. He used an elusive and continuous head movement that turned his figure into an impossible target to decipher. He slipped punches millimeters from his face and, in the exact same second that his rival was off balance, unleashed a storm of fists of superhuman power. A left hook to the body that destroyed the liver area, followed immediately by a right uppercut to the jaw that disconnected the legs of any veteran. The sound of his punches landing was heard in the back rows of the stadium like a sharp whip crack. The whole sports world was paralyzed with fear. The great world champions avoided mentioning his name, and the betting houses no longer even accepted money on who would win the fight. The only question people asked was in which second of the first round the victim of the night would fall. Faced with the refusal of the main contenders to risk their careers against such a destroyer, promoters searched desperately through the rankings for someone willing to sign the contract. They needed a name with enough experience for the fight to be approved by the Athletic Commission, but accessible enough not to risk the meteoric rise of their young star. They found the answer in a 28-year-old man born in the rural town of Tulsa, Oklahoma. A peculiar guy named James Tillis, known in the pugilistic environment as Quick Cowboy. The tabloid press and television commentators made the cowboy the target of all their mockery. They laughed openly at his broad cowboy hat, his field boots, and his strong southern accent. They presented him to public opinion as a poor, deluded peasant who had accepted his own execution in exchange for a quick paycheck, and the cold statistics seemed to prove the skeptics right. Tillis arrived at this appointment with a severely battered record. He had lost 4 of his last 5 fights. Tough fighters had defeated him clearly, and many analysts openly stated that his career was in irreversible decline. To make matters worse, bookmakers placed him 7-1 against, a figure that many considered blatantly optimistic for the outsider. But the betting world, the arrogant press, and young Tyson's own team made an unforgivable mistake. They completely ignored the true nature of the man they were judging by his appearance. James Tillis was no scared rookie. He accumulated 47 professional battles on his shoulders. He had endured brutal physical wars against world champions of the stature of Mike Weaver, fighting 15 full rounds without taking a single step back. He knew pain, he knew extreme exhaustion, and he knew what it was to survive in the hell of the heavyweight division. In addition, the Cowboy kept a crucial secret in his preparation. A few weeks before the fight, a thorough medical exam revealed the real cause of the fatigue that affected him in his last fights: a severe allergy to wheat. By drastically correcting his diet and eliminating the foods that were poisoning his muscles, his physical endurance returned to optimal levels. Together with his trainer, he worked in secret for 6 continuous weeks with an obsessive strategy: use his reach advantage, maintain uninterrupted lateral movement, and tie up Tyson's explosive arms every time the monster tried to enter short range. The night of May 3, 1986 arrived at the Civic Center of the small town of Glens Falls, New York. More than 4,000 people packed the venue, expecting to witness another express slaughter by the young local star. The first bell rang and Mike Tyson shot out of his corner like an enraged bull, looking to connect the single devastating blow that would end the fight in a matter of seconds. But what happened next left the entire arena frozen. The Oklahoma Cowboy did not freeze in terror, nor did he seek desperate protection from the ropes. He moved with the lightness of a middleweight, danced on the canvas, and used his left jab like a constant whip that slowed the executioner's advance. Every time Tyson tried to close the space with his characteristic head pendulum, Tillis extended his arms, slowed the onslaught, and locked the giant's shoulders with surprising strength. In the center of the ring, the Cowboy answered punch for punch, throwing right uppercuts that grazed the young prospect's chin. The second round arrived, and frustration began to show on Tyson's face. For the first time in his professional career, his most violent combinations failed to find a static target. The Cowboy slipped, tied up intelligently, and spoke into the beast's ear, daring him to keep coming forward. By the third round, the entire stadium entered a phase of murmuring and confusion. The young star's perfect plan had broken down completely. Tyson no longer looked like the omnipotent destroyer of previous nights. He looked like a mortal fighter, confused by the speed and strategy of an opponent who flatly refused to go down. However, the danger represented by the young Lion of Brooklyn was real and deadly at any second. At the end of the fourth round, when the crowd was beginning to get impatient, Tyson managed to decipher one of the Cowboy's movements. He slipped an attack, planted himself firmly on the canvas, and unleashed a devastating left hook that landed squarely on Tillis's jaw. The punch sounded like an explosion. The Cowboy lost his balance and fell seated on the canvas. The arena exploded in a roar of euphoria. Everyone present stood up, convinced that the usual script had returned and that the slaughter had begun. Any other opponent in Tyson's history would have used the mandatory count to stay on the ground and save their physical integrity, but James Tillis showed the stuff he was made of. He spat the blood from his mouth, stared directly at the referee, stood up before the count of 8, and smiled at his rival's corner. The Cowboy refused to be the victim in the movie. During the 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds, the battle turned into a monument to human willpower. Tyson continued to advance with rage, throwing punches capable of knocking down brick walls, but Tillis absorbed the punishment like a century-old oak. The Cowboy absorbed brutal body shots, took combinations to the face, and responded immediately with bursts of 3 and 4 punches that forced Tyson to take steps backward. In the 8th round, desperate at not finding the knockout route, Tyson committed the unprecedented gesture of switching his stance to southpaw, a clear sign of the mental confusion dominating his corner. We reached the 10th and final round. The historic streak of 14 months and 14 consecutive knockouts by the young prospect was officially dead. The crowd could not believe what their eyes were seeing. In the last 30 seconds of the fight, it was the Oklahoma Cowboy himself who trapped Mike Tyson against the ropes, throwing combinations of punches and forcing the King of Terror to cover his face until the final bell sounded. When the 10 rounds of combat concluded, the judges handed in their scorecards. The unanimous decision victory was awarded to Mike Tyson justly for the accumulated points and the 4th round knockdown. But the true moral victory of that cold May night belonged entirely to the man in the cowboy hat. James Tillis lost the fight on the judges' papers, but he gave the world of sports an unforgettable lesson in dignity and courage. He proved before the cameras of the entire planet that no invincible monster exists if you dare to look him in the eye without fear. Young Tyson left the stadium with his undefeated record intact, but with the most valuable lesson of his fledgling career burned into his memory. Overwhelming talent and ferocity are useless when you face a man who is not afraid of death. If you are passionate about these real stories of endurance where the arrogant discover humility and the underdogs earn the eternal respect of history, do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Click right now on the video appearing on your screen to continue enjoying the most epic and poetic moments in the history of combat sports. See you in the next installment.